Okay, we're just going live here now. Hey, welcome everyone to the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for Wednesday, January 30th, 2019. Let me just get my video started as we usually do here. Get things all plugged in and switched on. Here we are. Oops, I have to still fix my cameras. Bear with me a second here. Okay, that should do.
The next earphone will cover your head.
Yeah, the other ones had a problem with the cable, so I had to go to a backup set that Guy had left here. So, yeah, they're pretty big, but they do work well. And they're fairly comfortable in spite of being so huge. Okay, I think I'm zeroed in here. Feel like there's a button I haven't pushed. I don't like that feeling. Let me just double check here. Make sure all systems are working.
Good morning, Rick. In Facebook, it's okay.
Okay, good. Thank you, Dan. Alrighty, well, let's get going here then. And I usually start things off by asking if anybody has anything they would like to show and tell. Maybe I should officially say that my name's Rick Crammond, and I'm your host today for the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group, as I have been for the last 5 years, every week. So, anybody have any interesting projects or anything they'd like to show or tell at this point?
Now it's few people. It's not about yet.
Not many people yet, and it's early morning in European time. So we usually have to wait a bit for people to kind of wake up and get going and so on. Well, let me see. I was thinking I would show an older video that I have, one of my reactor concepts, and maybe that'll fill in. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's I'm going to actually edit several versions of this video and put it together into a better video that shows this reactor, because I kind of like it as one of the many designs that came up over the years. So yeah, let me set that up then. Okay, just about there. Just give me a minute here. Okay, you should be able to see the image. Oh, let me turn off the chime first. There we go, that's better. So you should be able to see the image there now of the video. And I'll just explain a little bit about what you're about to see. It's explained in the video, but let me just go over it a little bit.
Held up magnetically, apparently, no?
Well, that's right. It's that's one of the features. One of the features of this particular reactor is that the globe or the sphere is levitating magnetically. There is a magnet inside of the plastic sphere, and that bottom chrome shiny thing at the bottom is actually a levitating magnetic assembly with a circuit inside that reacts to the magnet inside of the sphere and keeps it levitating. You can get these on Amazon or eBay and that kind of place for under $100. And it's really pretty cool. You can use the same magnet and different things. It doesn't have to be this particular sphere, but this is the one that came with it. So I painted it to make it look like a copper sphere, which it could be technically speaking, rather than a plastic one. And then I put it in, the whole works is inside of this plastic chamber tube, which is a vacuum chamber. And the hose you can see at the top goes to a vacuum pump. So, and then there's a couple of other tricks that are involved with it, that have to do with the copper pipe that you see at the top, the curved copper pipe there. It's kind of special, and I explain in the video how that's hooked up and what that does. So, yeah, and this is from 2016, basically about 2 or 2.5 years ago, something like that, I guess. So this was one of the concepts that came out. And keep in mind that the Keshe plasma reactor group, you might notice by the name, has to do with plasma reactors. And many of the initial designs that we were working with had to do with the Keshe patent application, with the spherical reactors, primarily with different loadings and different ways and means of rotating and loading them. But most of them were under a vacuum condition and with gases. Gases were used, various inert gases, and hydrogen, helium, neon, argon, xenon, and so on and so on. Did you know so-on's a gas? That was the original concepts that we were working with. So let me play the video, and it should sort of explain as it goes along. I think it's about 6 minutes long here. This reactor design is dedicated to Megharan Keshe of the Keshe Foundation, who started all this business of these rotating spherical reactors that we are testing. Okay, this is a prototype of a possible future keshe type reactor. We've learned that plastic is the new type of material for reactors that is good to use. This is a plastic globe inside of here. What we have is a vacuum chamber that the globe is suspended in and actually levitating above this surface and below this one, with no shaft and no bearings in between. It's magnetically levitated with magnets inside the sphere, and in the base here there's an electronic apparatus that enables it to levitate. However, in the future there'll be other ways of doing the same effect. So, for the prototype, it's as if, and we have a levitating reactor core made of plastic. Okay, now we have the vacuum lines here, which go out and create a vacuum inside their main chamber, which can be useful for other purposes, to add gases and other effects. And on the other side over here we have a valve that enables atmospheric air to come in, travel along inside this compression fitting, where there's an 1/8 inch copper pipe that goes inside the reactor. And let's have a little look at that, see if we can zoom in on it. You see that copper pipe comes down there and is very close to the side of the reactor. So what happens is when I open this valve with vacuum at the other side, when I open this valve first, there's atmospheric air inside here first. Let's create a vacuum. Whoops, I need to shut this valve first. Okay, we're to do it slowly, or I might do something with the ball. Okay. Basically, we have a small vacuum inside there. I'll just cut the movie for a minute and get this pumped up better. I didn't actually cut the movie, so bear with me a minute while we get through this part. Okay, I think we've created enough vacuum for testing purposes. Still not very much vacuum in here. Leaks, probably have leaks. Okay, here we go. I'm going to open up this valve over here, and we'll see what happens to the rotations of this sphere. First of all, let me notate the RPMs. Got 34.9 RPMs currently in a counterclockwise rotation. Let's see what happens when we open the valve. Whoa, it's speeding up pretty rapidly. 141, 177. I'm going to shut it down a bit. Okay, we're at 231 right there. Sort of. Okay, well, obviously we need a little more work on this design to make it work properly. Part of the idea is we can give it some other gases into the sphere or into the other chamber by using this technique through the septa with a needle and syringe arrangement. So you'll see what happens to the syringe when I stick it in. See how it pulls the gases of the syringe right directly into this chamber. With a long enough needle, it's able to go right in and into the top of the sphere while it's rotating, is the idea. It's not rotating right now, of course, but it will be. All right, well, that's the video for now. And it ended up with a bit of a failure at the end there, but I took a couple of other videos and set it up again, and we got it up to about 300 RPM before its out of balance condition caused it to crash. So it's just a concept, just a way of considering a type of reactor that actually might be practical at some point if we're still working with spherical type reactors and need to have a certain setup where the reactor is positively positioned without having any mechanical apparatus attached to it. So it can be, it could be in space, it could be in the vacuum of space, and still be able to operate in a positioned location, and the speed controlled as well. And it can be reversed with a simple jet of air from that copper pipe. You could have two pipes, one in one direction, one in the other direction, and just have two valves, turn each valve according to which direction that you need or wish the reactor to rotate in. So it's kind of fun. The needle at the end indicates how the needle could go through and then into what's called a septa seal, which is a little green rubbery seal that the needle can go through. And when you pull the needle out, it still retains a vacuum inside the place where the needle went into. It's used in chromatography, spectrograph kind of instances. And the septaceal on the top of the sphere would allow the needle to go into the sphere, which would already be under vacuum condition, and release the specific gases that you wish to experiment with into the sphere or into the volume around the sphere that's inside of the vacuum chamber. So you'd be able to control the conditions of the gases in both of those locations. Alrighty, any questions or comments about that? Shall we move on? Okay,
Inside, sorry,
Rick,
go ahead.
go John.
your magnetic base does it work with batteries or what? Because you can't see any cables there.
Yeah, the cables are in the back and go down. It's actually got like a, what do you call it, a transformer that plugs into the wall. And so it works on a reduced voltage, I think maybe 12 or 18 volts that goes into it from the transformer. So it does, you could use a battery pack. It could be completely portable that way. doesn't take that much power. It's mostly the control rather than the power. The magnets themselves keep the unit aloft, but the control mechanism has some electromagnets inside that alter the magnetic field to keep it centered, which is kind of tricky.
Does it have a metal plate down below on the sphere or magnet?
Inside the sphere is a ring magnet. And you can take that out of the sphere if you like and put it underneath a toy or some other thing that you wanted to levitate. A different kind of sphere. The magnet could be on the outside of the sphere rather than the inside. And it can handle a certain amount of weight, but not a lot. And the more weight will diminish the distance between the unit on the bottom and the thing that's being suspended. But there are sort of industrial quality units as well that could raise a ball like this maybe 3 times the distance or more. So it is using magnetic fields to control the positioning of an object, which is interesting in itself. But maybe in the future, the magnetic fields won't be generated by sort of a matter level clunky kind of apparatus. It'll be more maybe using ganses or some sort of high energy gases or other ways of generating a more extreme plasma condition rather than the matter level condition to control the positioning.
This reminds me, years ago, I remember seeing some videos of somebody experimenting with some half-sphere magnets. They were sort of ring magnets with a form of a half a sphere that produced several funny effects.
Yeah, there's the, what is it called? The plasma something. The fellow was doing experiments and had a number of metal balls. I believe they were just steel balls. And in the magnetic field of those 2 convex shaped magnets, they were able to line up all these balls sort of lined up in a pattern. He could have different patterns according to how many balls were in between these 2 convex magnets. It would be almost like putting the balls on top of the convex bottom plate that we see in the video here. And all of a sudden you would see maybe a dozen little balls would all line up in a geometric shape, you know, maybe a hexagonal shape or something like that due to the magnetic fields. Instead of all clumping together, they actually separated themselves because each one gains a magnetic field in the greater magnetic field. And so they position themselves accordingly, which is, I thought, kind of interesting. You'd have to look at the video, and I can't play it and so on to get a more clear understanding about what I'm talking about. But I think that's what you were referring to, John.
Yes, it made some special effects. I forget, it was so many years ago.
Yeah, I can't quite remember the name of that. It was a pretty popular video that showed the way the field forces work with the magnetic kind of counter-rotating magnetic fields, which seems like a really important idea. I remember that idea, the idea of counter-rotating magnetic fields being very important to me since I was a young child for some reason. Maybe I saw a science fiction movie or read something in a book or something, but I know that probably by grade 1 or 2, I would have been under 8 years old probably, that I somehow knew something about these counter-rotating magnets or magnetic fields somehow were important. I still feel they're important. And that's one thing that came up in that video of the Russian guy, Chernov or Cherny, I think was his last name, who showed the 3 discs and counter-rotating magnetic discs and this levitating apparatus, both out in the field and in his living room. And he talks about how he put high voltage in and ultrasonic and these rotating discs and a disc in the center, an aluminum disc that sort of is a moderator or an in-between disc that separates the fields. And he has 2 counter-rotating fields. And apparently, if you were to believe the videos, he's worked it out how to provide a levitation effect. It may be fake, but he's got all the he's certainly got all the buzzwords of the researchers and so on in the past 50 years, and he's done all the research and he has the knowledge and he seems to have put it together. And it seems fairly simple, it's just really finicky. Kind of like my apparatus. It's basically simple, but it goes out of balance here and finally collapses because it's a little funky. But it shows an effect, it shows something that could be worked on in a more professional environment, perhaps. I just did it as a way of spurring people's imagination and get some conversation going, and maybe somebody out there might be inspired and go, wow, that's really cool. I've got a few ideas of my own I could add to that. And or maybe they've thought of the same idea but didn't think of doing it that way, and now they can see how they could actually implement the experiment, and away they go. Or so I would hope. But now this is, what, 2.5 years ago or something. And in a way, the situation has changed. There's no longer so much emphasis on these matter level reactors to start with. And certainly the gaseous reactors, there's less interest in that, especially from Mr. Keshe. We don't talk about the patents so much and the actual implementation of the reactors as envisioned in the patents, at least the rotating gaseous reactors mentioned there. But on the other hand, it's still there. There's, as Mr. Keshe has mentioned, there's as many types of reactors as there are stars in the universe. So you can imagine, well, anything you can imagine can be possibly built or implemented. So it's a matter of, will it be effective in what you envision it for it to do? So would something like this be able to generate the fields needed for being an energy reactor, or for creating a lift or positive positioning effect? I'm still convinced it could. With the right gases inside, it would be very similar to what you see in the keshe patent application. Maybe I can find a picture of that. Let's see. No, I'd have to get it from the internet here. Oh, bear with me a minute. I'll have a look for that. Any other comments or questions? Dan, you were going to say something there.
Yes, it's about you are proving the for replicate reactor of user cache from patent with inert gases when you are making this device.
Yeah, that would be the idea. I think that's what you're saying. That
Is for understanding the concept, why it's how it's levitate, how interact the magnet with the others things. For explain the field of magnet of plasma.
yeah, well, if we look at this is the gravitational energy system, one of the patent applications of Mr. Keshe. This is the main patent application. And if we look at like this picture here, for example, maybe I can make it bigger. How do I do that? That. Okay, that may or may not be a little easier to see. Okay, if you look at the basic core is a round spherical reactor, and it has a central column that comes down, in this case, with the little black things on the end of, whoops. Okay, that's it there. The black things on the end of the column are magnets, but it could be a rotating magnetic field, but in this case, it shows it as a matter level rotating magnets inside the very core of the reactor. And it has these gases which are entered in through various tubes inside the central column. We have hydrogen, helium, neon, and argon are shown on these levels. And there's another level that's doesn't show any gas on it, but we could assume there might be something else there. And you can see on the bottom part of the picture, this is supposed to indicate the magnetic fields, the MF1 and the MF2 indicate the two magnetic fields that build up from this the layering of the gases and the rotation of the magnetic field to initiate the gases. And you can also see the MF1 in the top image here. That's the magnetic field. That's the same basic magnetic field that we see in the bottom picture, the MF1. That's a smaller magnetic field, but you can see in the top picture well, perhaps it says or MF1 plus MF2. So perhaps, I guess it's showing two different versions. The MF1 in the top version is showing the fields, and the idea is that the fields of the reactor extend out beyond the walls of the reactor. So that's always been a prime feature of the keshe reactors. Once you get the fields initiated, then they can extend out, well, depending on the intensity of the reactor, it could go for kilometers or more, or even connect on the other side of the planet, or perhaps on the other side of the universe. If we look at a couple of other designs here, we can have a look at this one as well. And again, you have the gases, hydrogen, helium, neon, and argon. And that's the weight of the gases. The hydrogen is the lightest. It'll be at the center of the reactor as it's rotating, because the heavier gases, due to the rotation, will tend to go toward the outer wall of the reactor. Okay, so, and you can see again, there's both it's like a three-dimensional series of spheres within spheres created from the different gas combinations. Okay, have a look at a couple of other iterations. This particular one has two central columns that come in with counter-rotating magnetic fields, which we've mentioned already. This is, in a way, similar to the Russian invention that I was just discussing, where he has a magnetic, I think he has 6 magnets on a disc in the Russian invention. And there's one on the top and one on the bottom, both with separate motors, counter-rotating discs. And in this case, it even shows, strangely enough, we look at it closely, it actually shows it's as if a disc in the center, that we see these arrows, for example. It shows that it seems to be a rotating disc in the center. At least these gases are rotating. Maybe it's more just to show that the gases are rotating, and it shows the layer, the barrier between each of these gases, because they'll tend to separate out into a laminar kind of flow and keep to their own molecular weight, or atomic weight rather. Okay. And this is another iteration with showing all these little magnets on the tip of this central column. It shows north and south, so that they're in a particular pattern, that when the column rotates, it creates a special effect. Let's have another look here. Yet another example. again, we have two magnetic fields, one contained inside the other magnetic field. And this is the way plasmas tend to operate. You'll have a series of magnetic field intensities, you could say, or there'll be a barrier, or as you can see, there's like a separate wall between MF1 and MF2. They're more or less contained by sort of a Coulomb barrier between the two. And that you can see in this example over on the right here. One field is inside the other field. And this is typical of the way plasma will operate with what's called what's it called? Double, the term escapes me right now, but it's a double wall effect from the shielding of the plasma. I've talked about that from the SAFIRE project, SAFIRE, that illustrates the separation of the fields of the plasma. And you can have a more intense plasma further away from the central core, actually. It can be higher temperature than the electrode at the center. Anyway, let's see if there's more pictures here. Another similar one. And we're getting into just repeating here. Okay, well, that's gives a bit of an idea on the, just trying to see if there's any other images that might have got missed here. It's a very long patent. It's about 100 pages long, the longest patent I've ever seen. This came out originally, came out in 2007. And I'll just give the link here. There's different ways you can get this patent, but here's the one from Google. And you can download the PDF from there if you so wish. Let's put it into the various chats. European patent application. It was withdrawn as for a patent before it became patent, and that way it can't be withdrawn as a patent because it never actually became a patent. It's actually a clever way to put all the information out there without it being withheld, because if it became a patent, it would instantly become national security and it would be instantly withdrawn from the eyes of the public. So by this method of just keeping it as a patent application rather than an actual patent, then it stays in the public, and you can go through and read all about the chain of energetic events that's created by way of a rotative magnetic initiation of a basic ionization of a gas, such as hydrogen, which then triggers a controllable chain of energy transfers or scintillation to the next following layers of introduced gases. Etc. This patent has so much information in it. Some of it does get repetitive in some places, but I'd highly recommend if you can kind of force yourself to get through it, because it can be quite sciencey and somewhat overwhelming. But if you just take it, read some of it, if you get overwhelmed, take a break, go back to it later, read some more. And the information is there, and it's the way the universe works. And Mr. Keshe has it laid out, I think, very nicely, all about the transfer of energies that occurs through these multiple layers of gases, similar to the way it's found in the universe. And if it works in the universe, generally it should even work on planet Earth, even though it seems planet Earth is its own universe to itself and seems to break all the rules of the universe from time to time.
Now, Rick, when you got an international patent asked for, how come they say it's kept secret through a national security? It's international patent.
It's not, well, it's international, but it's a European patent office. So you can imagine that they would control the patents for Europe. And if it's something that's scares people, or there's a matter of, you know, a new kind of weapon, for example, or a new kind of, well, for example, in the US, if you try to patent an electric motor that's more than 20% more efficient than the current electric motors, then that patent will be seized as national security, because that would be too disruptive to the entire market of electric motors. And that would, you know, it could bankrupt and, well, all the companies and that deal with electric motors, which are a lot. And that would not be acceptable to that particular government. So
that's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, it is and it isn't. You can see their point of view. They're trying to protect themselves and the market. If you're a corporation that's got billions of dollars invested into, you know, something like electric motor, or maybe you know, turbine technology, for example. That's another good example. If you were invested heavily into bladed turbine technology, which has been very heavily invested into in the last 100 years or so, then you wouldn't want to even know about the bladeless disc technology of Nikola Tesla, because that could be disruptive and disrupt the entire system that's been set up to make money off of the turbines and all of the research and development and, you know, high-tech materials and high temperature materials and so on, to be able to withstand all these enormous pressures. And it's all about the high-tech systems that serve that bladed turbine. If all of those were simplified, then that would take the whole chain of profit away from those corporations and all the subsidiary companies that feed into them and so on. And it's the same conundrum that came up at early in the 20th century, in the early 1900s, when the first cars were being made, and the Ford company and GM and others were getting together, and they had basically like a group that controlled the technology. They were an industrialist group, and they had it all figured out about the fuels that were going to be used, and that was important for controlling and making money off the vehicles that were being produced. They didn't want to make just money off the vehicles they were producing. They wanted to make money off the fuels that were going into them, control the fuels that were going into them. The initial idea of Henry Ford got changed. Ford had the idea that the fuels should be able to be produced on the farm. So you would make alcohol, you would make fuels on the farm and use them for your car and for your tractor. And that was, a grand idea, but the powers that be didn't like that. It took the control away from them. They couldn't profit off of farmers making their own fuel. So they come up with a better fuel, basically gasoline, and refined it and so on, and started to make that available. It could produce more power, and it could had some other features. And soon they had the whole oil and gasoline industry controlled, and everyone switched over to that rather than making their own fuels and whatnot. And they forgot about the wonderful electric cars that came out even before the gasoline cars, and it became just the sociably acceptable way of doing things, such that by the time the late 30s and early 40s kicked in, and Nikola Tesla had this electric vehicle that ran on one 12-volt battery. It could run all day because it drew in from the ambient energy or from some transmitter somewhere. He took a reporter out for a test drive in Chicago, I think it was, and they drove around and took it up to 80 miles an hour or whatever, and it performed flawlessly. And Tesla says at the end of the test run to the reporter, "Well, what do you think of this wonderful invention?" And the reporter says, "Well, we all use gasoline now, Mr. Tesla, and we don't really have a need for going back to the electric way of doing things. That's old-fashioned now." And Tesla broke his heart. It basically kind of gave up on mankind at that point. Right, Jedi mentions it wasn't, well, there was one 12-volt battery involved, I believe, but he mentions there thermionic valves, and yes, an antenna on the roof of the car, which apparently either picked up the ambient energy, or more likely maybe it was transmitted from some other transmitter in somewhere. But a lot of the details got lost to history, you might say, or deliberately covered up, and more likely.
That's also why they bumped Diesel off. He brought the diesel engine into service.
Yeah, well, he wanted the rights to it and so on. And of course, the companies that developed diesel out didn't want him to have the rights to it. So he went missing on a transoceanic voyage across the Atlantic, and didn't make it to the other side. So yeah, there was a lot of shenanigans went on in the early days of controlling the whole oil industry. And now they find themselves in a bit of doo-doo with the whole diesel thing, and multi-billions of dollars in fines, and a lot of the CEOs and other managers have gone to prison, and some of them can't travel. If they go to the US, they will be put in prison. For example, some of the CEOs of Volkswagen that they didn't get, they got a couple of them, but they're waiting to be able to charge them or to prosecute them in the US. But they are not willing to go there. And there's many other companies have all been hit with these fines for cheating on their emissions testing. So this is all result of going down that very dark pathway of the burning of fuels, which is now responsible for, well, the UN estimates that over 6 million people a year die from the results of burning fuels. Not all of those fuels are diesel or even oil. Some of it is just burning wood and other charcoal and so on is in the homes is a big cause of that. But a large percentage, somewhere around half, is due to the burning of fuels such as diesel and gasoline, especially diesel, which is especially harmful. So literally somewhere around the vicinity of 10 to 20,000 people a day are killed from the results of burning fuels such as diesel and gasoline. That's an enormously large figure, I find. And I mean, just look at the figures. It's every year there's more people that die from air pollution than died in the Holocaust. And that's every year. So it's like a Holocaust every single year. And we're talking about the same gases that they used to kill people in the Holocaust are still killing millions of people a year. Diesel exhaust, that's somewhere around a third to a half of those killed in the Holocaust were killed by diesel exhaust until it became cheaper to use the chemical, forget what it's called, Xylon or whatever that they used, which was a byproduct from the, again, the oil industry, but the chemical industry. And it became cheaper to use that than to run the diesel engines to produce the exhaust in order to kill the people in the Holocaust. So it's, to me, it's the greatest travesty of the 20th and now the 21st century. And it's slowly becoming recognized, although the emphasis, unfortunately, is on global warming and climate change, rather than the 20,000 individuals that died today, gave their lives for ridiculous air pollution. And we talk about the weather, the global warming, we talk about the weather, and well, maybe it's going to increase the oceans by 2 centimeters, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, every single day, 20,000 more people are dying. And never are they discussed when you talk about climate change and this so-called man-made climate change. It just bugs me because all of the planets of this solar system are warming up. Wake up, people. They come up with the whole climate change debate so that we didn't think about the 20,000 people that are dying from the exact same fuels that they're talking about that cause the climate change debate. It drives me crazy, these humans. But anyway, you gotta like them because we don't have much choice here. We're way outnumbered by the humans. The souls are outnumbered by the humans, it seems. So you have to give them their due. Anyway, don't mean to go on in my favorite topic there, but it is something to think about. And what is air pollution? It's nanoparticles. You look into it in extreme detail, which is what nanotechnology is, and it's little plasmatic nanoparticles that are able to travel through our body and lodge in various organs and have their way with us, the same way that viruses or bacteria are able to move around so easily.
Rick, this is Moshfik. I wanted to talk a little bit about the patent.
Okay.
Rick mentioned quite a few things about the patent, and in the last 3 weeks, I've been going through. There is this USB download that you can get, and it has all the patents, not just the one that Rick was talking about. So I was going through this material, and the patent is extremely useful, actually, and I'll go into a little bit more. Um, in my early days, when I was doing my company and I had my own patents. So, about patents, there is one thing very interesting about patents. So, with the lawyer, I wrote my patents, and this is in software, nothing as significant as this. And after writing the patent, I read my own work and I couldn't understand it. So it's, patent is written in a weird fashion. So so one of the things I would like to mention is that this patent, although it's kind of laborious and repetitive and all that, there is so much detail in Mr. Keshe's patent. I mean, it's unbelievable. In a sense, although it's about gas reactors and how you operate the gas reactors, there are several things that are very important about these gas reactors, because this gas reactor is essentially the functioning of the planet Earth. So one can look at it from that point of view, in the sense that you get a very good understanding how the planetary planets come into being in space. So this is a very interesting part about this whole patent for me and from my point of view. And then he also goes into how what's the difference in parameter for Earth versus something like a star or sun. So there is not that much of a difference in terms, it's a continuum in a sense. And you have the planet Earth and you have the sun. So you get a very good idea of the operation of both the planet Earth and the sun. So this is the basic level of this patent, which is not in the books that I have read. I mean, the books don't give you as good idea as the patents do in this respect. In terms of going from using matter state to go into plasma state, and it's very fascinating in that sense. And so that's a sort of like a macroscopic view of what the patents contain. Beyond that, there is quite a bit of detail. And I made this motorless reactor I have shown here before, and I'm going to do a lot of things because now I have a much better idea after reading the patent. It's difficult to go through it. I mean, I couldn't understand my work, and reading Mr. Keshe's work is a lot harder than what I did. So it's kind of like it takes a little bit of effort and patience. And I know Rick has gone through it, and it's surprising that I was thinking about talking about this today, and as usual, Rick reads my mind and starts talking about things. So there's that part of it. And so I mean, the diagrams that Rick was showing is actually, they're very important to study, not so much in terms of the actual materials and mechanics or magnets or gases used, but what are the functions of them. And that portrays a very good idea of the reactor operation. And beyond that, one of the things that, I mean, I always wanted to understand the magrav, which I had, I mean, I couldn't find any material, even in the knowledge seekers workshop, enough for me to get all the interactions. And after reading the patent, I have a much better clue about why we have this coil the way we have it now in the magrav, and what is the interaction between the coil. There is, of course, each rotation of the coil, and then the whole coil structure. And if you unwind the coil, what happens, and things like that. It's actually quite a bit of detail in this kind of interaction. So, for example, one of the things that Mr. Keshe talks about is the rotation and turbulence. Now, if you look at the coil in a magrav, So you have the smaller rotation. You can think of it as a turbulence or the local gradient versus a large scale gradient, and which is the coil itself. So I'm not, it's difficult to explain all of these things in the way I'm talking right now, but I'm just giving an idea that there's a lot of material in it, and it's not just relevant to creating gas reactors, but also creating other manifestation. It doesn't have to be anything that we have heard. We can come up with our own manifestation, but with GAN's material and other things. And so it is very interesting from these points of view to examine the pattern with a lot of patience. That's one of the things I would emphasize, because even if it sometimes it looks like, oh, I'm not getting any of these, it's to stop, as Rick said, to stop and like take a breather and then come back and that kind of things. The terminologies are kind of not something we are familiar with. Even people who are from science, like I am, it's difficult to go through in that sense. And and some of the sentences are way long. Sometimes you can't, like, whole paragraph is one sentence. This is often done in patent writing, so it's kind of ridiculous, but but it's there. But nevertheless, but it's very useful. I mean, I find it to be very useful because of a lot of things got cleared up for me. And I try to understand the basics as much as possible. Until that is clear, it's very difficult to proceed, really. And some of it is by doing one gets clarity in terms of implementing these reactors and whatever. But so, Rick was talking about positive positioning with respect to each other. I did a magnet. Yes, it does a little bit of it, but in order to go to the next step, one has to kind of get a very good idea of how some of the details work. So in that sense, it's very useful. And so I highly recommend going through the patent. And the USB sticks has a lot of versions of the same patents, and there are some other patents in there, like the medical patent, the Oasis system. In essence, all of them are useful. Some of them, it's kind of looking at the same thing from different point of view. And so I recommend reading through all of them, although navigating, it's kind of like 1,000 pages of patent material in there, more than that, actually.
Yeah,
and there is one particular document. I mean, I have to look at the name of the document. Let me open up my computer, because this is not the patent, but I think it is called the annex to the patent or something.
Yes, yeah.
That document is about 200 pages, but don't get intimidated by it. Go through it. It is very nice. And so this is my recommendation. As you can tell, I went through all of it, but it's very nice. And that is a document that in the USB disk, that every document has copies and revisions and all kinds of things, but that is only one. And let me try to find out. And it's under, let me see. Hang on, let me open my computer. I can't.
Okay, well, you look for that. In the meantime, I'd just like to go through this one paragraph that stood out for me, especially in relation to what Jedi was mentioning and what we talked about with the Tesla car that had vacuum tubes in it and had a way of, Jedi mentions the thermionic ionization. So it mentions in this paragraph in the patent, this method of ionization of hydrogen atoms has been observed in the galaxies, and therefore it should be easy to achieve the same in a reactor environment under the right condition. The extreme ultraviolet rays in a vacuum condition cause prompt and direct photoionization of hydrogen. whereas the lower energy photon causes a combination of fragmentation and delay thermionic ionization. Thus, use of extreme ultraviolet ray is the fast and direct way to start the reactor from cold. It's almost like talking about starting a car and talking about the device that Tesla has could be actually similar in their operation, not in the technical details, perhaps, but perhaps there was something common there. And it just sort of that word thermionic. It's funny that it came up in two different contexts, but there's so much information in this patent, and it's so highly detailed that it talks about all the different applications and ways and means of doing things and the way it is in the universe, and it gives all kinds of examples. And that by the time you actually read through the patent, and like Moshfegh says, it's not an easy read. All the scrolling I've done here is only the tip of the first less than 5% of the length of the patent. And there's a lot of information. But once you get the gist of what he's talking about, and you start to see the actual repetition of the principles, because he keeps hammering the principles through this patent, and it reinforces the idea of these multiple layers and how one layer will instigate a chain reaction into the next layer, and these energy transfers that go on, and that each of these gases is important for that transfer of energy in order to step down the energy to something that we can use. And it's actually quite fascinating, and it's applicable not just to, as Moshfegh mentioned, not just for the gaseous reactors, but in terms of our understanding of how plasma works and how it can be controlled in our experiments. Okay, now.
Okay, I found the document, and the name of the document is the New Generation, the New Gravitational and Energy System. And it's 188 pages. And it has detailed calculation how to calculate the volume of the reactor.
Where did you find that? That was in the USB key information?
It's in the folder, USB sticks folder, keshe patents, first patent, keshe patent, that's the top level folder. Next folder is first patent, keshe, patents keshe. That's the second level folder. And then next level is pat 1. And
can you show this? Can you show this on your computer, like, or?
Okay, let me.
Or maybe I can.
Let me. Okay.
Or I could do that.
Get on it. I'm on the.
It's on. I can do it here. It was in first patents keshe. Is that what's the folder?
Yeah, first patents keshe.
Pat 1 or Pat 2 or patent 2?
Pat 1 patent.
Okay, let me. I'll show this on my. So that we can sort of go through here and see it. Okay, let me see here. Okay, let's see, let me just share my. So it's in the first patents part of the USB key.
Yeah,
and we go to Pat 1. And sorry, a patent or patent docs?
Yeah,
or
patent. Just go to patent under Pat 1.
Patent, BMP. Oops, I get thumbs database. Didn't come
no,
through.
not that one. The other one. Just patents. I think patent. The folder's name is patent.
Yeah, I don't have.
Under pat one, there is a folder called patent.
I've gone to Pat 1, I've gone to patent, but somehow I only have BMP patent, and it doesn't have things in it for some reason. Maybe I might be missing it in my.
I can show it from my computer. Let me log in to the.
Yeah, I'm not sure why something didn't come through there in mine.
Okay. I'll share the screen once I get there.
Getting there, Moshfek.
No, I have to mute my audio, otherwise there will be echo. Hang on a second, I have to reconfigure. Just a minute, I'll be
Okay,
there.
well, maybe what we could do is Ivan had an idea he wanted to put through on the white screen. Maybe you can just take a couple of minutes there, Moshfek, and we could have a look at what Ivan had in mind. Do you want to do white screen, Ivan, or do you want me to? If you need a white screen, I could set one up here.
Hello, you hear me?
Hi, hello.
Hello, everyone. How are you hearing?
Hi.
Good? Sound good?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sound check. Okay, good.
Do you want me to open a whiteboard?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Actually, I can do it by myself, right? I did last time. How I did that? Oh, right here. Share screen, right? No.
You go to share and then select whiteboard.
Oh, this is a share screen, right? First.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, perfect. I see now.
Okay, there you go.
All right. I just got some idea from your idea, actually. It was like a visual something present in my mind. When you was talking, I just seen this picture. So I want to draw on a board.
Okay, perfect.
So, yeah, how about you was talking about this rotation ball, right? So we know now we have a magnetic water, right? Magnetic guns. So why not use it? Oh, wait a minute, just a sec. I forgot about that. Where's how I did that? No. Oh yeah, right here. Okay. How about use it one ball with a magnetic guns or magnetic water, whatever, inside, right? You hear me?
Yep, yep, go
Oh,
ahead.
okay, yeah. And just put this little ball inside a lower ball with any guns you want, right? And put this ball between two flat coils. Or just one idea. I think you got me, right? What I mean.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
should
I
be.
had
Yeah.
considered that
So yeah, it's
using the magnetic GANs could be a
so
great
yeah,
way.
magnet inside will make this stable rotation, right? It's stay in the center. So and we'll make this magic. And also another idea, I just got it when I was waiting for get here. Why not use it just a few flat coils like that? Maybe wait. So one, it's like a side. I don't know how to show that. Maybe another one. So it's like a star formation, right? Like three coils with angles. So this always must be pointing to center, okay? And one on top also. So and ball inside. So you can just control this ball this way too, I guess. In 3D actually. So that's it. It's my input. So if you want, we can discuss that now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's similar to what I've been considering as well.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea to have a magnetic GANs ball, and then using magnetic fields to control the position of the ball, essentially. And that could be done in 3D space without any connecting shafts or motors. And perhaps once the ball starts rotating, the magnetic GANs would form a GANs ring inside. You essentially have a ring magnet, which would be basically the same thing as the image I showed with the floating reactor, which has a ring magnet inside the reactor, and that's how it's controlled through the electronic circuit.
Okay, Rick, I can show you.
Alrighty, go ahead.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
Hello, Rick.
Okay.
Yes, hi Jedi.
Yeah,
Okay,
I wrote
so
the link to the patent. It's online. It's there in the chat.
So this is the file. Let me see.
Okay.
Can you see my screen?
No, I can. Oh, there I can now. Yep.
So the document I'm highlighting is the document I'm talking about.
Okay.
It's not
No.
the description of the patent, but I think it is the annex because it has the amount of detail is unbelievable. And anyway, so that's very useful in my opinion. Anybody who is interested in gory details, I think some parts can be skipped because we don't need all the details for some of the other forms of reactors. But if anybody is interested, I can go through the basic operation of the gas reactors because I have gone through it so many times. I think it's fairly fresh in my mind later on. I won't be available for about half an hour. So if anybody is interested, I can talk about it. If not, that's fine as well. But it's actually quite a lot of interesting things, and it all applies to motorless GANs reactors or field reactors, field plasma reactors, including dark matter-based reactors and so forth. Quite a bit of material because he goes into operation of the sun, how the sun operates, and the black holes. There is the black hole patent, or black hole paper. I think that's what he wrote. There's that one. I read that one too. So the black hole is very interesting because that's there's a lot of application of that in terms of generating field. So if you want to generate high strength field in the inner part of the spiral ring that he draws all the time, there is a lot of useful information in that area as well, using dark matter or the principal matter, to use the terminology of the books. All right, you guys continue, and I will, if anybody's interested, I can talk about it later.
Okay, I'm just trying to sort out the link here. Jedi, you put a link in, and we had a previous link. And let me see what else. 17 is the one patent.
It's the second one. It's the second one.
Oh, it's just the second one. Okay, it's got the, I didn't see the picture with it, so I couldn't tell. Right, so there's additional information in the second patent. I'm wondering if that is part of what Moshfaq was talking about. I think it's added to the end somewhere. Just trying to find that. Well, suffice to say, there are certainly plenty of places that get information and check into more detail the two patents and that that annex that Moshfaq was talking about. Between them is enough for several years of study, if not a lifetime or two. In fact, there's probably enough information there for a small army of engineers to work for several hundred years. Yeah, it's very, very interesting stuff. And if anybody wants to get into more technical details and actually set up a lab and start doing some tests and running some reactors like that, that would be, I think, very interesting. It'd be nice to see a university take it on seriously as a project and put $1 million or $2 million into it, you know, just to sort of start the juices going. When you think about it, I think about all the technologies we have and the literally billions and billions, hundreds of billions into the trillions of dollars that have been put into, well, some pretty dubious technologies. Our nuclear reactors, for example, which is a good example of billions and trillions of dollars have been invested into the technology. And now they don't know what to do with the results of that technology. The leftover radioactive materials are a real pain to deal with, and they're finding that the nuclear reactors, they're just not as you would think that, you know, putting out that much energy and it should be making a ton of money off of it. It's so clean and so on and so forth. Well, there's lots of issues, it turns out, and it's very, very expensive, and it doesn't, the whole storage issue in itself is enough to throw everything for a loop. So with the keshe reactors, the idea is that there's no radioactive byproducts of the actual reaction. So this is what makes it different, and the fact that it can be made into a smaller size reactor that could be useful for anything from a home to a small city, let's say. Definitely suitable for a town, or especially in remote locations. Okay. Did you have more you wanted to say about that, Moshfek?
I can go into the detail of the reactor operation, but let's do it like half an hour later, if that's okay. If anybody's interested, I mean, it's fairly detailed. I can go into it, but it's not that difficult either. But,
I think it might be good to. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, let us know when you might be able to, and we can think about doing that. All right. In the meantime, are there any topics or other devices that somebody might like to bring up, or other items? Has the conversation spurred anyone to think about certain ways? We see Ivan is continuing here. He seems inspired. He says, I think even the rodent coils, nano-coated possibly, can help to rotate the ball in the center. Well, that's true. The rodent coils, we see them on the internet in YouTube videos with a magnetic ball in the center of a rodent coil, and the rodent coil can rotate that magnetic ball up to actually hundreds of thousands of RPM. And when it rotates, it starts to kind of levitate as well in the center of that rodent coil. So it does make sense. Maybe that is a way to levitate and rotate a magnetic GANS ball, for example. Has anyone tried that? I've tried GANSes with the rodent coil, but I haven't tried the magnetic GANS. And I haven't tried different inputs into the rodent coil as well, which could change radically the way that it performs. And he says a few reactors like maybe the star formation, and you can fly, perhaps. Well, let's see it. We've talked a lot in this group over the years about flying and about the positive positioning and so on. It would be lovely to see an example of perhaps lift, or at least a reduction of the strength of gravity on a system. That would be fine. I think it's time for someone that's been waiting in the wings to come out and give us some knowledge about that. Looking forward to it. Sometimes I feel I'm on the edge of a breakthrough, but usually it's got so many other things distracting me that it's hard to focus. It really requires, this kind of work requires a focusing, like even just as Moshfek was mentioning, just going through the patent requires a total focusing of your attention to go into that world and expand it out and make it real. And the same with our experiments. We have to really focus on them and put all of our attention and our presence into that experiment, and work with the knowledge and work with their results, and try to approach it from various perspectives that maybe we haven't before. And maybe we can find that clue or that little breakthrough that enables something special to happen. Maybe create light, or create lift, or maybe a gleaming little gold particle in the reactor as we create new materials. all of the things that are talked about in the Keshe Foundation, like the creation of new materials, the creation of energy, the lift and positive positioning, and the health effects and so on, are all mentioned in the patent. It goes back to, you know, the interaction of the fields from gases or ganses or other materials that are able to interact to create the fields, and the fields end up being able to be worked with in various manners to produce what we wish from it. It's such a beautiful concept and a beautiful universal way of doing things, in spite of all the convoluted details perhaps inside of the patent. The actual ideas are so simple and match with what's being brought out now with in physics and in nanotechnology and in astrophysics as well. A lot of the older ideas are being thrown out, and the new ideas of fields and interaction of plasmas and so on, that is becoming more important rather than the some of the ways that the astrophysicists have been describing the universe in the past, and unfortunately leaving out massive amounts of energy and matter because it didn't fit into their equations or into their world viewpoint, universal viewpoint. But more and more we're getting transparent and more clear on the way the universe actually works on all different dimensions and levels. Okay, what else do we have here? Anybody with any comments, questions, or something they'd like to present?
Well, yeah, we got last time we spoke about the mirrors, and there is a very easy way to polish them.
So kind of hard to hear you there, Jedi. I'm not sure if the Zoom will automatically increase that or not, but maybe get a bit closer to the mic for now. Thank you. So you were saying about mirrors?
About the mirrors, that we could polish them in a very easy way by placing them in a stream of water, just letting them there, and it takes some time, but then they will be polished perfectly. So we could do this, I said, in a magnetical way, by using air or by using water. So at the same time, we would be able to clean out, to wash the river, because we are creating that kind of field. So if you put these nano-coated plates on one side, and then 100 meters below you put the zinc plate, and so you are creating this field, and at the same time you are polishing it. You are polishing the plates, and this continuous movement, it's in fact connecting the fields. So it's purifying the water.
That'd be interesting to see the polishing effect of the water. That could be a good experiment to show over time.
Tested in a polluted river to find out what happens. Normally, it
Now your
washes.
volume just came through really loud now.
I don't know what's happening.
Okay. Hopefully it'll adapt itself back. Go ahead.
Too loud now. And so this is one of the possibilities is just to put the plates in a stream, pure water. You have to go on top of the mountain and just put it there, leave it there 1 month, and then go back and see the results. Not by acting directly. So it's a kind of alchemical process that is taking place. It takes time. So you don't need to practice any kind of change to force it into a condition. You allow it to reach that condition. And so it has a completely different kind of spectrum, because intent is within the fields. It is a part of it, but it's not dictating. So the mountain is going to participate. The water flowing is going to participate. And it would create no damage, correcting itself. And also, we could see on the plates the formation of condensation of particular elements resonating with the field. And that is what we saw in plates when the specific fingerprint created the presence of a metal. So not using, let's say, engines spinning with the GAN's substance, but simply by using the element, and then this element, whilst ganses are forming, it will stick on the nano-coated quasi-crystalline structure of the plate. Any kind of element. So that's why we should take care of the elements that are of the fields that are around the vase. Atanor, it was called. It's a possibility. So just by submerging the plates in an open environment, allowing the mirrors, so these would be rounded one, shape of a disc, or even convex, so that you can work with a different focus on both kind of images. It's like receiving or sending according to the position of the antenna of the image.
You mean using the concave or convex surface, depending?
Depending on the side, you would have concave or convex. So it's just the polarization of the field. By receiving one particular point, a focus, or expanding the signal. Curvature then dictates the kind of expansion or the distance from the mirror, so the focus. It's optics within a perspective give you the exact distance.
Yeah, I wonder if that would be the same for the plasmatic. Would it still adhere to the same rules and principles as a light ray would?
Yes, because even plasmatic is within a field that is, we assume that it is plasmatic because it is formed. So it's formed by something. What participates in the formation of the image? They could be particles or waves. It is light. In any case, you have light working. So it follows the laws. But of course, optics, and you can see that kind of light, so could be understandable from this point of view because we see it. We do not see plasmatic in the same way. So this does not mean that the laws are there. And so now we are working with quantum optics. It's a kind of a third generation of optics. So it's dealing with dark lenses. In fact, you would not find a device with a kind of crystal lens in them. So because they are reaching another kind of dimension where light is going through, what we see is a kind of condensation of light that when it meets matter, it's stopped there, most of it. So we see reflection, and that is what we think it's the evidence, and we call it reality. But there are wavelengths that higher and lower ones that penetrate, that just go beyond, and that would be transparent, so we couldn't see it. But it is still forming. So it's like heat it's creating a change within the body.
Okay,
part
now,
of it. Yeah.
Okay, just to so-called, to, so to speak, reflect back on what we were talking about here. So we were mentioning like a light ray, for example, if the red lines indicate a curved mirror, then if it was a light ray, when it hits the mirror, the ray will, say in this top ray here, it'll reflect back at the same angle that it hits the mirror at, basically. And in the case of a concave mirror, like two concave mirrors, the way they're set up here, it would tend to reflect the rays into the center of the mirror. So if you had a mirror and you had the light of the sun shining on this mirror, you could focus it on a central point, and you could burn a piece of paper that was in that central area because of the extreme focusing of the sun's light. So would that be a similar effect if these are plasmatic mirrors? And Mr. Keshe has mentioned in the case of a concave mirrors like this, if you hold them together, they would concentrate, the plasmatic fields would be concentrated. So we assume that it would be a similar effect to the light of the sun focusing in one sort of area. But would it be, is it going to reflect that, is plasma going to reflect at exactly the same angle, the way that light rays do? Or is it going to be more of say, sort of a generic effect along the surface that might have fields that are given off rather than exact angles of reflection? So are the fields kind of concentrated in the center here rather than a reflection of a straight line light ray? Light rays travel in straight lines. Does the plasma, do the plasma fields, do they really travel in straight lines, or are they different somehow?
Well, light does not really travel in a straight line because it's curving. But of course, it takes a long distance, but it is curving. And at the same time, if we enlarge the image of a laser beam, we find out that it is in fact a kind of spring. It's rolling on itself. So yes, that is kind of an effect we have in the nanocoils. And according to the length of the laser beam, you have a wider or smaller, or well, it depends on various ingredients that you put in the experiment. This is so it's a kind of consequence of the oscillating particles in some way. It's like moving sideways all the time. This is a process that is enables kind of equilibrium and any kind of transmutation. It's like the range of the field, that is the size of the laser beam, that is balancing itself to survive, in fact. So it's moving sideways. It's like saying the mirrors, once it's on the side where you have a convex, and the other one, and then it goes to the convex, and then it goes to the concave. It's moving. It's moving from one side of the mirror to the other. It's like kind of a fluctuation within a range. That is so it's following the laws, but we cannot see it, so we have to deal with it with instruments that are capable of perceiving that transferred field that is so subtle or so fast that we could not even think about it or see it. Yes, that is the way, and there you are considering, of course, two different rays, but in fact, as energy radiates, it is one center of a point that is radiating in all directions. So it would be you have to add 20,000 rays and then you obtain the image to see it. You create the model, and then you see how it shines. It shines back. That is what you do with a Christmas ball. It just in a dark room, you send the beam, and then you see the effect. Now, if you want to create a microscope, it's very easy. Just point a laser on the surface of the crystal ball, and then you send the image on the ceiling, and you shall see the pattern of the plastic surface and of the mirror coating that is placed upon the Christmas ball. Of course, you should wear glasses and etc. protections, but by using the right kind of frequency that is not harmful for the eye, you could see this kind of effect.
Okay, in the case of the nano-coated copper mirrors that we were discussing here, like Mr. Keshe mentioned, in the case of the what we call convex mirrors here, as opposed to, this would be the convex side that we're looking at here. In the case of light rays, they would tend to bounce off in sort of the way that it's indicated here. It would disperse the light rays. Any rays that were in between these two disks would tend to be dispersed instead of concentrated. So the middle should be more or less a dispersed area, maybe even a voidness, let's say. Now, you mentioned also this idea of rays coming out. So what about if we look at if we take this one section of the mirror and expand it out, perhaps, and look at it more like if it was this thick and had multiple layers of nano layers in it, would not this be essentially active plasmatically and let's say emitting those fields at the same time? So it's not a reflective light principle so much in the sense of those layers. It's going to have a plasmatic field, at least in the direction this way and this way, along the mirror, along the edge, along the surface of the mirror. As we know, plasma tends to flow, let's say, within the in between the layers. It likes to flow in between the layers of the nano layers, because that's what plasma does, and that's what nano layers tend to set up the space for the plasma to flow. So if we have a back and forth flow, do we at the same time have a what do you call are the fields being emitted from these mirrors, or are we looking at more of a case of reflecting fields rather than emitting fields? I'm just trying to discern what the difference is between something that is emitted from an object as opposed to something that's just reflected from an object. Like, for example, almost everything we're looking at right now, except maybe your computer screen, is a reflected light image. So I look around the room, I might see the computer mouse. It's this black looking object on my white looking desk. Well, both of those things are just the reflected light images that I am seeing. But if I look at my computer screen, the whiteboard here, for example, then I'm getting an actual, it's not the reflected image, but the direct image of the light from the LEDs in the screen or whatever different screens one might have. It actually generates the light and projects it out, similar to what I was showing in with these arrows that come out of the mirrors. So are we talking about two different phenomenon here, and how does a plasma mirror reflect these two realities, you might say?
Optically, we could see light bouncing, so coming back, whilst the object is absorbing, but letting out only what you can see. This is a, let's call it passive, because it has no light within. The light is coming from the outside of it, the outer part. So it's macrocosm that is working within a microcosm, and where
Like,
they meet.
For example, yeah, right, exactly. So, I mean, we have a conundrum here. We have a controversy in a way, because we're told and we're experiencing the black nanocoating of copper. It's the absence of reflection. It absorbs all the fields. That's what it does, and that's what it's supposed to do, and that's why we get that flat black look, is that all the fields are, all the light is being absorbed rather than reflected. But at the same time, we've used this perfect absorbing material, and by a certain polishing process, creating a mirror out of it. And if you've seen the mirrors that are created, they're actually a very good mirror. They will reflect, you know, your image or whatever, like a normal mirror. It's dark looking, but it's a perfect reflection, very clear and so on. So we have this dichotomy of a nano-coated mirror. It's almost a contradiction in terms in itself, because by nano coating, that's where we have the absorption of fields, and it's usually a black coating of some sort. At least on copper it is, and that's what it does. It absorbs the fields and is able to contain the plasmatic fields in that darkness. But perhaps there's other fields that we can't see that are transmitted or that can be felt, let's say. So it seems like with these mirrors that one can feel the fields. That's kind of the whole idea with them in a way. So I'm just trying to work through this this dichotomy of the reflection versus absorption, and of light versus plasma. And so we're talking about like different dimensions or different perceptions and different responses and so on, depending on what our viewpoint is of these mirrors. If we were to treat them as an optical device, then they would behave pretty much like a regular mirror. Maybe they would have some special effects or special properties that we could pull out of them. I'm sure they would. But generally, it'll reflect light at, we assume, the same angle that it hits the surface as a normal mirror would. Normal convex mirror, let's say. Now, but at the same time, it contains these plasmatic fields. We know that it's more or less like a superconductor along the length of these fields. And at the same time, it's a more or less a perfect insulator going normal to the surface, or trying to go through all these layers. So interesting situation.
And reasoning, when we see a black mirror. So we think it's absorbing everything, because we are still dealing with the light we are used to consider as light. This kind of light is not visible. So black does not mean that it is absorbing it. And so in the drawing, you have oblique lines there, and that is the structure of the nano-coated copper. And then you have this plasma moving within the lines. It's like because it's like water flowing in the spaces, between the spaces. It's ready, so it's using them. And this distance between within the pattern creates the wavelength. So that particular field that will be bounced off the material we are using. So one way we have absorption of the fields. Then at the same time, in the matter state and in plasmatic state, you have kind of resonating effect, because all the plasma is vibrating within the structure at the length of the nanometer scratches. So it's sending back a precise signal which is augmented, which is much more powerful, but in that specific range. So it's creating a reflection, which is a white sound. It is absorbing like a black sound. It's the opposite way. It's absorbing all of it, but sending back, polarizing, in this case, kind of image or a signal. Now, just think about in a studio where you go to record music. You have an anechoic substance on the walls. It's a sponge. And every hole is absorbing sound so that you have no reflection. That is the feeling you could have if you were something like an insect standing on top of one of these plates. It's absolute silence because you are within this anechoic room.
That's a great example, Jed. I remember going into a room like that when I was a child at the Science Center that's in Toronto, and they had the walls covered by this sound absorbing, the latest high tech sound absorbing material. And when you walk through this curved hallway, all of a sudden it would get totally silent. And it's such a shock because normally we have sound around us all the time. There's always little sounds, big sounds. And, in most places, there's never, ever totally quiet. And when you go into that space, it's a shock of, wow, this is quiet. It shakes you because we're not used to that. And it's maybe a little bit of experience of what the voidness is, in a way, that connection to a place where there isn't sound of the matter level stuff that we normally hear through our ears, and maybe not the sights of the matter level stuff that we see through our eyes, and so on. And in a way, it's sort of good practice to put oneself in that position to be in a place of absolute silence. And people go to nature or to what do you call it, sensory deprivation tanks and that kind of thing to experience that place of no sound. And when you mentioned it in relation to the nano layers, it's perfect. If you can imagine yourself shrinking down into this tiny wee organism that's there on the surface of this nano layered, multi-layered substance that's absorbing all the fields, you would feel like you're in a very unusual condition, I would think. You would just feel like it's totally absorbing everything. It's sort of like being maybe beside a black hole or something. It's just, but at the same time, there's something coming off, like Jedi was mentioning. There's some sort of fields or rays or coming from the plasma itself that's generated inside the layers. So at the same time, you know, we know that the plasma has its own fields and that we can feel those. Okay, carry on, Jed. I didn't mean to interject there, but it just occurred to me that was a
Yes.
great way to look at it.
This so this substance in the studio is a lattice, so it's rubber. It's kind of a rubber, and is absorbing. Now, in the case of the nano-coated plates, it's exactly the same. It's a lattice, but to us, it looks like something very hard because we are in this kind of octave. But if we consider insects, they are so hard that really nothing damages them. They can fall off the building and nothing happens to them. They can jump off the cliff and nothing happens to them. So it's a different kind of perception of what we think it's solid, and so density. It has to do with kind of this kind of mirrors. So this substance is in fact hard because we polish it. We start with metal, but going into it, there is more and more space in between. It's even empty. That is a kind of a very, very strange idea that enlarging the picture, it loses its consistence. And it is a quasi-crystal kind of structure that is sending back something, but not within the range of the signals that we are producing. So probably just by controlling the temperature of the anechoic lattice that we have in a studio, we will find out that the temperature of the wall is rising because it's transforming that vibration into heat. And this is the normal consequence. So by creating such a mirror, we are in fact building a kind of resonant instrument.
So here's a question for you in that regard, and I was thinking about this actually earlier today and yesterday regarding these discs. When you hold them in your hand, for example, the heat, the infrared from your hand will be heating the discs, heating the copper, and so creating more atomic and molecular movement, you could say, or atomic movement at least, and molecular, within the structure, the physical structure of these mirrors, these discs. Now, will that infrared energy that basically is a vibration that's how we measure temperature, and is through that's how we might measure the vibration of the particles in or the of elements and so on, is through what we call temperature. That's a way that they make that measurement. But is the heat from our hands, that temperature increase that goes into these plates, will that be transformed into plasmatic energy and given off on a different energy level, perhaps? I mean, that energy is going to go somewhere. Maybe it'll just be rebroadcast as infrared, but I have an idea that somehow these the discs will interact with that infrared energy that comes off of our bodies, our hands, or interact with it if you're using the disc with interacting with another being, for example, and using their infrared energy, and their heat is interacting with the disc on one side and your heat on the other side, and we have a focusing on one side of the disc. Like if your hand is over on this side, you're holding on to the disc, let's say. Well, the heat from the disc is going to be interacting from this side of the disc, is going to be interacting with your hand, and vice versa. The heat from the hand interacts with the disc. And on the other side, you're going to have a different interaction. And especially if there's another human over here that's you're interacting with, and maybe they have a broken arm or something, and you're interacting with this heat signature from their arm. Now, all that's sort of more or less matter level way of looking at it, with infrared rays and heat and all. It's all totally measurable in that sense of the science behind it. But what if in this interface of the disc, there's an actual transformation that occurs that maybe adds to the plasmatic effect of the disc? It kind of makes sense if you're holding the disc. Yeah, a resonator and
The diapason. It's allowing the specific frequency. So that would be A frequency, 440, to propagate, to radiate from its surface. So hand, in fact, is generating a field that is a natural one, that is amplified in some way, but the curvature, the distance from the body, the size of the pattern on the surface of this nano coating, the layers, the numbers of layers, well, they all affect this kind of transmutation and send towards the body this invisible light, but we could even see it, creating a kind of a dipole antenna, and you could even see the frequency, the field produced by the hands. But they are within the infrared and very low kind of frequencies, something between 5 to 5 up to 25 hertz, kind of fields that are oscillating, and they are harmonics within a scalar field, but they are harmonics at the same time. And this, you can see it. So hands are producing this kind of fields. It was called manas. This energy, then, by using a mirror that you hold in your hand, could be amplified or sent directly in one specific part of the body that requires that, let's say, transmutation. And so it's feeding the body that needs something. That's why hands, when you place your hands on a part of the body that is, you feel pain, then it eases off. It's, sound does exactly the same thing. So we are working with a part of it. We don't need any more to irradiate it through this frequency, but we can use sound. So sound, we could start from 50 hertz to 5,000. That is human voice, let's say. And once you reach the right curvature, you have the right sound that is coming out and affecting the area where the pain is. So one experiment is very, very easy one. If you have a headache, you try to sing this note, very low, deep sound, like and then you rise the frequency upwards, just to the right kind of sound that is interfering with the frequency of the pain you feel. And you will find out that when you reach that kind of a specific sound, it's going to hurt a lot. So you concentrate on that sound and you sing it, the hum, let's say, you sing it 10 minutes and the pain disappears. Because you have removed it by sonic, let's say, interference, but it has dispersed that kind of field that was creating the headache. To develop this kind of skill, you can just enter in the bathroom where all the walls are sending back sounds. So it is an echoic room, and you sing. You can sing, and then you will find out that one specific note, it is in fact the resonance note of the bathroom, and if you sing that note, it is so strong that the walls will start vibrating. And it really gives a kind of a very strong effect on the body, because it is radiating, the body is radiating, and it's receiving back 2 or 3 or 10 times more than what it is producing, because of this kind of waves that are resonant ones. And so they participate and give back the energy. So we can do it by using hands, and it was called manas, or sound, and that was called mantra. By reaching the matching the exact frequency. In that case, we are when we are in the bathroom, or in the empty room, or in a temple. That's why we built temples that way, because proportions give exact values, and so they give exact notes. So within the teaching, what they don't say is still there, but to see or to feel it, you have to place yourself exactly where everything shall be aligned. In
St. Peter's Square in Rome, there are 2 points in the square where you focus exactly the curvature and the columns disappear. You have only the front one, and then you see everything is transparent. But from any other point in the square, you have a wall around you, because there will be stones everywhere. So the field is not entering, but from that specific spot where the focus is, it can go in and out, because it matches the structure of the crystal, and so it's a resonant key. If you go upwards towards to 15,000, 20,000, you can shatter, you can destroy crystals. You just blow them, they go to dust, because that note is going to vibrate, and it is so strong to that kind of structure that is just going to free it. And that is like pain within the body. And so it is a salt, it is a metal, it is a crystal, and you are working with that field, and so it's free, it's gone. And so this explains why ganses are able to process non-resonant fields, which are chaotic ones. And so all this fits within a kind of understanding, explanation that in fact macro and micro and macro are connected, and you can see things from one side or the other. And this still sound it's working just as light is working. It's another order of magnitude, but the laws are still there, and resonance is taking place. And what is non-harmonic, it does not follow order. It allows, but then this non-harmonic structure, it shall naturally go, like plasma does, fit into the scratches that are present on the nano-coated plate. So once experience is there, you don't repeat the mistake. And experience, most of the time, you know, cats scratch you if they don't like what you are doing. So next time you respect that pet because he told you. Now, if you make a mistake, then we pay, we understand, our experience, and so that is the effect of the plasmatic within transmutation. That is alchemical transmutation, not transformation. That is within the states of matter when we study it, and so we like to play with the transforming. Once you enter the subtle part of it, then it is transmutating, because signal is not only coming from your hand whilst you are holding the mirror, but the mirror at the same time is receiving from the environment and is sending back to the body. So who says that you are thinking that you are using this instrument to do some kind of instrumental experiment, but it is working within such a great amount of fields, so wide, that you don't even know what it's happening at the same time.
Maybe the instrument selected you for the experiment instead of you selecting the instrument.
The idea, the concept is that whilst you are writing on one side of the page, you are reading on the other side of the page what you are writing at the same time. And in between, there is this flat surface, it's the page, but it is the mirror, and that is conscience. Once you reach that position, you are enlightened, and really it's wonderful, because at the same time you are appreciating whilst you are working, but it is nothing that has to do with pleasure. It is something that is conscience, pure conscience. Although we need to focus on something and polarize our attention and concentrate the beam. But it is, in fact, with the kind of cones that we are working. The shape of this image that is going on one side or the other of this mirror is a resonant kind of frequency that is expanding. So it's like placing a mirror, cutting in half a cone, and that is the field. So it is three-dimensional, but there is a time working at the same time, like in the laser beam. So you would have a four-dimensional cone acting. That is considering four-dimensional. Then we could go into quantum cymatics. And there, it's not even the mirror that is sending back a specific field, but the position of the charges that are the energetical structure of it. So into fluidity, in some specific points of that structure of the net, there are knots. And these knots are where you find more energy, so you can just use it if you need it. Everywhere else, there is not this kind of concentration, but there you shall find a concentration of energy. So where did we build the temples, pyramids? Exactly on the cymatic placement of the planet net, let's say, field. So we placed it there because it matched the maximum frequency, so that it could be used in connection. It could feed. There is in our culture, well, it's going back to Sumeria. The origin of what we call man, and in so many ways, the original placement, where they acted, where they created a kind of jump by giving us something that was not yet there, let's say, accelerating a process. It's going down to Cape Town in South Africa. There is a city that is called Egoli. This is E and gold, the city of gold. And so these, well, they have been called in many ways, golden Elohims, or, well, they came down with a number of ships, and these, there were beings that matched and created and worked upon a genetic, adding something. That dates back to something like more than 200,000 years ago. And we still have the caves, we still have the mines. We still can see what they did. It's still there. There are 4 cities, and then there are stones that are placed all around the area for hundreds of kilometers. There are stones that are placed in rings, ring formations. And so you would think someone lived there. And then you start calculating how many such temples were built, and how many people they used to create them. So you find out that there are millions of these rings, rock rings, circles within circles, and all these kind of structures are left behind out there. Now, what happened is that once they finish the job, let's say, exploiting this kind of mines, they left, and the stones are still there. But what about going inside one of these fields and trying to use your mobile phone or even greater antenna to contact a satellite kind of antenna? Nothing is working there. Nothing at all. Because these structures have been built to resonate with the field of the planet there and send the energy upwards. And this is what they were using with Vimanas. And that's why we find the same kind of temples everywhere, and golden most of the time, golden, and structures that look like a Z. And so they were sending Tesla is nothing new. Wardenclyffe is a modern concept of a very ancient one. And so that kind of field was a free energy field, and everyone could use it. Everyone who had the technology, let's say, to transform that kind of field. So energy is still flowing out, but we don't even see this. We miss it. And that is, again, working together with nature by placing stones in a specific way, in a pattern. So once that you understand that this drawing means something, so you can go to see what happened in Nazca. You can find out that temples are resonating, and there are lines, straight lines that connect them. And so they belong to a map, to a net. which is an ancient one. And the proof of this is within the size of the stone, because you have to use a unit. And this kind of unit is the Pelasgic thumb. And you find this kind of measure unit everywhere within the pyramids that have been built all around the world. So going back, there is one language and one way to calculate, and then we produce different ways. But they all belong to one. And this is what happened with language as well. So it's constant reinterpretation of understanding that is fluctuating from one side to the other and moving about. And sound is just changing because of this and follows the same laws. So it's either within yourself and within knowledge, the seeker could find the answers inside, or by studying what happens outside. So it depends on which side of the mirror you are sitting. If you are on the right side or if you are focusing. And so these two ways, it's what in India they call them, within meditation, it's the fast path or the slow path. Let's say slowing down your mind until you have absolute, you meet silence. Once you have no thought at all, there you are, let's say, resting in peace. You reached stillness. There, conscience is able to expand. But if you go the other way, then it goes faster and faster. So you have vipassana and shamatha. You have two different directions. One, it's burning, it's very fast. It's moving faster than light, than thought. And the other one is slowing down up to 3 thoughts in a day, 1 thought a day, no thought at all. But you are still there. So presence is there. That is understandable from a meditative point of view. What happens outside is a translation of what is happening inside. That's at the same time, both fields are participating.
But what came to mind when you were speaking is I just decided to make this image here, which is, you see the dot in the middle.
Yes.
If I direct your attention to the dot in the middle, you will see that. And if you were to focus, if one was to, I was to focus my attention on that dot and totally just with all my full attention just focused on that dot, well, that is like the concentration side of the mirror. That's the concave part that can reflect and focus the sun's light into a pinpoint. But if we were to look at that dot, and I was to say to you, okay, instead of focusing on the dot, focus on the entire whiteboard, and the dot being just part of that whole totality. And then you find that the eyes, rather than focusing on one point, they diffuse, and you can actually get a diffused vision, which includes, if there are other dots and other things in the picture, you would still get the whole picture, let's say. But if I was to ask you to focus on this one dot up here, then the attention goes off of the totality and focuses on that one item of our attention. So it's like two different ways of perception. And this one is like the concave side of the mirror, where there's total focusing. If you're to use a mirror like that, they have them for cosmetic purposes. And the one side of the mirror will be concave, and you look at it and it'll amplify your face if you're looking into it, so you can presumably fix all those little pimples or whatever. And so it's a focusing in. And the other way, having the diffused vision, what they used to call, I think in some of the movies, like they call it not diffused vision, but going, not squirrely eyed, but there's a word for it, where you let your vision diffuse and you see the whole picture, the whole totality kind of all at once. And there's no longer a focus on a pinpointed object in your vision. You're trying to include all objects, the whole totality. And so it's two different versions. And looking at it that way, of the whole totality, is like having the mirror. And if you were to look at the mirror from this side, you would be able to see, if you look at it three-dimensionally, especially, we're seeing it two-dimensionally, but you'd be able to see all the things to the side. That's why they have mirrors like that mounted on poles sometimes, a convex mirror. So you come around the corner in your car or walking or whatever, and you can see the people around the corner, and you can see the big picture. In fact, they have your rear view mirror in your car most often will be partially convex, so that you can see easily the things off to the sides, and it doesn't focus. It diffuses the vision to be able to, sometimes you'll even have a little stick-on mirror, especially trucks, little round stick-on convex mirror. So you can see all the things off to the side, especially for backing up and so on. So we have this concave and convex mirror system built into our own physicality, into our attention. We can focus with our attention, and we can become very focused as humans into the nano level, into the macro level. But we focus our telescopes, we focus our microscopes, because otherwise it's too fuzzy, it's too nebulous. But on the other hand, we also have the capability of detaching from that necessity to focus on a particular item. And we can, especially if we learn certain techniques, we can learn to have diffused vision. We can learn to take in the whole totality of our vision all at once and relax into that perception. And certain things can come of that. You can actually go into a different state of realization that the phenomena we see really is an illusion, and so on. And sometimes, if you might be able to see beyond the illusion through that technique, or have other perceptions, your feelings might kick in by the diffused vision technique. So I'm just saying, there's using our attention, we can use our attention like a mirror. And we do that naturally anyway. Everyone does. If you want to learn something, usually you focus in on it. Or if you're trying to see something in the distance, you focus in on it, and so on. But in certain times, it might be more useful to, instead of focusing, to unfocus, to withdraw our attention from the things we normally identify with, and instead identify with the totality. And that becomes an entirely different experience. So we're lucky as humans, we have these tools. We've got our mirrors, built-in mirrors. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, it's the opposite side.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just forgetting the illusion of that specific dot that is, let's say, asking permission to exist through your interaction. The moment a monk decides not to follow immanent kind of stimuli, and so not to focus his attention anymore on the eventual dots that you see on the page, then he will probably reach the other kind of attitude, which allows a vision that is not sacrificing the totality of nature. Because every time we create, culturally speaking, a system, a structure, force, we delimitate our field to a smaller kind of field where we master the situation, we dictate. And so most of the times, if any other signal comes from the other side, the other kind of world, outer, that signal they will deny. Everyone will deny the existence of that dot, of that new understanding, of that position, because they hold to the structure of their creation. So we can see creations within creations taking place all the time. But these are not complete. They are not total creations. They are partial moments that will last to the moment that someone is able to place a seed there, and the new tree starts growing. And then they will find that there is a tree in the middle of their field, and they didn't know anything about it. And so they say, what's this? And that is a new or a different or a forgotten piece of information that it was lost, and then it's coming back and it's there. Maybe because of the multiverse is alive, is a living thing, and so it allows universes to exist to a certain extent until they find out that they belong. And so all the, let's say, plasmatic energy flows in the correct way, and the resonance is not dampening anymore, because the field is not affected by a sponge that is, in this case, eating up. But if you enlarge in a microscope the sponge, those are thousands of black holes. So if you don't get the picture, you cannot understand. If you see it, then here we just found a few, and then what's this? Are we living in a cheese model, Gruyere? This is not possible. It's a partial vision we have every time. So we should allow changes naturally. When we force structure into this kind of pattern, solidifying it, making its density so dense and its weight so huge that no one is able to pick that instrument anymore. So it's no use at all. So you have to build instruments according to the size of your hand. Now we are playing with sciences that allow us to build instruments that are the size of a planet. But this does not mean that we understood the principles, or that we followed the laws. But nature that allows is not just sitting there. So it shall allow us to make a good number of mistakes. But eventually, if you don't fit within a natural order, it's just going to transmutate that kind of ignorance into a teaching. And this is what we all have to face. It's the dimension of what is greater. Even if we call things, it's the I am the best, the tallest, the biggest, the strongest. We like playing with numbers a lot. And we all find out that there are gods, and these gods are wonderful gods, and they have all the powers. They are omniscient, they are everything. And just see what humans, they just follow this kind of path. And so why is Google called like this? And why the headquarters? It's Googleplex. And so it is 100 elevated to 100 elevated to 100, the biggest number possible. You could continue to write zeros and never end. And the same concept is Baidu in China. 1,000 lanterns, but it is the same concept. When man wants to own everything, and so it's like children playing with numbers and saying, I wrote the biggest number of all that contains everything. And so we are living in this kind of illusion. And on one side, so it's practicing this kind of sharing, and that is evolutive in one way. And then on the other side, there is sometimes that scientist that scratched the surface of the nanocoating created a fingerprint and wants to generate something else. So that is attention. It has to be polarized. Then you have to have all the picture. You have to see it in the totality. And so understand that artificial intelligence used in this way is creating at the same time artificial deficiency. It's missing most of it because we are dealing with quantities and no one is looking for quality. Quantities, numbers. So instrumental to the matter state, to control it, to abuse of the matter state, but not allowing quality. And so love is missing, joy, happiness, all the words that you could put on one side of the blackboard and on the other side. So good and bad, okay. And just write down all the words and now find out what is matching, it's balancing that word. And you see, eventually, by carrying on this kind of study, you will find out that plenty of languages have eradicated or words have been cancelled and they are not there anymore. And this happens in the dictionary, in the vocabulary, in the culture, within every written book. And so, who is consciously acting upon is in fact projecting its own shape on that creation. So that's why we should focus on the fact that the mobile phone changed our thumb. It says, it teaches a lot. And it is going to change this fact, the simple fact. Our hands, a billion people are using hands in a different way. And so the brain is working in a different way because they are acting upon the thumb section of the cortex. They are using left and right at the same time. So we probably have solved a right-handed or left-handed problem and working with a balanced spectrum in such a fast way that you have to, well, in the past you had to be a piano player to go as fast as the digit, the text. So it's by considering the three possible positions of the mirror that you have, in fact, the image. But if we consider that this mirror we are talking about, this little curve, it is a principle, then trichotomy, which was body, spirit and soul, becomes dichotomy. And so we have a straight line, which is the image that is reflected reversely on one side or the other. And then we have the curve that is an expression of macro and micro. So you have a linear straight line, which is male principle, and curve, which is female principle. The three mirrors, or two different kinds of shapes, then participate to the understanding of what is called reality and should be in fact called totality and totality. And so there is nothing to add, just to feel. If you are a curved mirror, is just to feel it, receive it. Then if you want to look for the exact moment, then you use the line, you use a flat surface, and you create a flat mirror, and then you say, that's me. Are you sure that's you? If all the pixels that create your image are made by let's say, higher level of conscience, interference within this field shall create disturbances. So this is why happiness is not present anymore, because of negative interference that is dampening down. If the interference was a positive one, you would see synergy. And so the result would be over unity. But whilst we are working with the scarcity and in fact abstraction and words are missing, and so inventions are missing, patents are missing, because we do not allow them to produce the correct effects. Because still human beings have thought about something new to solve problems, but there are some that want to create problems so that they can solve them later on. So it's just according to how all this is allowing itself to be or not to be. And so we go back to Shakespeare, that's it. It's presence. It is the best position, to be present. And then consciousness. You don't need to move anything. You don't need to shout. Consciousness radiates, so it's present. And it's not present only within that dot, because that is the first manifestation, and we call it God. And so once we draw this dot, that is God. Now move it. And I remember one of the lessons was to write down the first 27 movements that this dot will create. And this is a very good exercise. Working within. And there's no help. You just have to find out by yourself 27 different movements. And it teaches a lot. So it's going back to one, and that is unity.
Yes, thank you, Jedi. Some very good thoughts there. I'd like to see if somebody else would like to entertain some thoughts here as well. And I do have the thought it's over 3 hours here now, so we might want to wrap things up soon. But I'd like to hear from others if anyone that was inspired through what they've heard to say something. Not seeing all the microphones opening up at once here. So I guess people are satisfied with as is. Well, I think maybe we should wrap things up at this point. It's kind of come full circle as such, I think. Jedi brought it around nicely there. Ursula, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm very attentive listening. All these beautiful words from Jedi makes good, feels very good. And almost after the important world peace from yesterday, where all the UC members have been concerned and put on the right direction. I think so. All this is very helpful. I must say that I'm not very at all technical, and all what happens in this group is for me very difficult to understand, but I always felt the intention and the vibration of these good feelings, and almost Rick, your patience for so many years and always there. And this is very helpful because helps us all, even if we are not technical, to find our way in the totality, the global mission, what we are invited to follow and to support everybody in each talent. And so I wanted only to say a big thank you, and see you later.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ursula. And yes, we do get well, not kind of, we do get very technical here sometimes. But I will remind you that what you're staring at here now is what it all comes down to. A dot on the page, and that's our presence, and together with our attention, that those are the two major tools that we have as a being to get around in the universe. And I truly believe that, and have for many decades, as those are the pillars, our presence and our attention, the pillars that we can build on for all of the rest of it. And I think that's important to start working with. And that kind of the teaching about the simplicity of our presence and our attention can get extremely complex. But on the other hand, if we keep bringing it back to the simple and easy to understand, and the way I look at it, if you can't teach this kind of stuff with a stick in the mud, then it's probably too complicated. So we do get a little overly complicated sometimes, but then we try to also bring it back and look at the big picture. And that's why I brought up the idea of different kinds of attention, the single pointed focusing attention, and the diffuse looking at the big picture attention, and just brought that up as a topic. And I think we'll be expanding on attention and presence, and what does that mean? What is consciousness, and other terms like that. So we all have a common ground to talk about, because these relate to the skills as a being that we need to go to space. And it doesn't matter whether you're going in a spaceship or in your own spaceship or without a spaceship. It's the principles will be all the same. So, whereas with the technical details, they could be all over the map, as Mr. Keshe said, and I repeat many times, there's as many types of reactors as there are stars in the universe. So, and then with each reactor, there's an infinite number of ways it can be loaded and viewpointed, different perspectives and different people operating. There's so many variables with all the technological sort of end of things and the implementation end of things, the manifestation of it all, that you can go on for billions of lifetimes and billions of universes with it all. But it all comes down to a dot on the page, and that's you. That's me. That's us. We are essentially, it was described to me at one point, your true nature is actually more like a pinpoint of attention. And with that, I'll leave you all with that idea to ponder until we get together for next time around. Any last minute comments before I wrap up here? Yeah, I'm just going to share the picture there. All right, great stuff. Thanks everybody for participating today in the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group for Wednesday, January 30th, 2019. And things are just starting to warm up to get interesting, I think. And hopefully we'll see both some new interesting manifestations of the technology, the plasma technology, and at the same time, we'll also get a better understanding of the big picture of who we are and how do we fit into all of this manifestation stuff that's going on, and both on the planet and around us and inside of us and inside of others and so on. It's a wonderful, beautiful mystery, and it's becoming more transparent all the time. So it's a great time to be alive, and I'm thankful to be part of this group and part of this new plasma technology. Okay, great stuff, everyone. See you next time around, and take in the Knowledge Seekers Workshop coming up Thursday at 9 a.m. Central European Time, as usual. And we'll get the latest from Mr. Keshe regarding the latest of everything. Okay, I'll end the live stream, and bye for now.
Goodbye to you all.
Bye, John. Bye, Rick.